our society. We talked about that a little bit last week. By far, the vast majority of people in the world are skeptical of anything supernatural. We have a lot more faith in our science and in ourselves than we do in God, for the most part. I think y'all all understand that. So it's important that we study the miracles and that we embrace them fully and support them and are prepared to defend them when we're challenged about them. So that's one reason for this. And not only to defend it, but what did we say was the greatest miracle of all? The resurrection of Christ. And if we can't support that and we can't believe that with all of our heart, then what are we doing, right? What are we doing here? So we very much believe in the miracles, and we need to prepare ourselves to discuss them with people. We talked about society has lowered the bar on what a definition of a miracle is. Advertisers like to use the word miracle in their products. We talked about just a little bit. But even anything that we find as wondrous or awesome or whatever, we want to quickly call it a miracle. And so to help us in our discussion, we need to define what a miracle is, okay? And so we come up with this, and I think it's pretty good. It's a little bit wordy, but a miracle, a scriptural miracle, is an event performed in kindness through divine power, creating wonder, signifying the authenticity of the Lord's messenger as someone who is revealing God's character or purposes. In short, miracles were always there to give credibility to whoever was working the miracle. And there was no doubt about whether it was a miracle or not. It wasn't questioned. That was really not something that would be coming up in the discussion. If you seen it, you knew it was a miracle, and whoever performed it, you knew they were from God. Okay, that's the real purpose of it. Paul.
Unfortunately, Hollywood has taken the supernatural and made it into whatever they think is supernatural.
Yeah.
Just cuts down anything Christians even think about.
Yeah. And Hollywood's never a Christian's friend. Very, very, very few. There's a few good movies out there. I shouldn't say never, but by and large, they attack Christian values. And I think somebody mentioned to me after class, one of the more popular movies a few years ago, The Miracle on Ice. Even a hockey game qualifies for a miracle, if y'all remember that, when the Americans beat the Soviets. So, yeah, Toby?
Are all miracles instant healing?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good point. Yeah, and there's no question about whether it was a miracle. Everybody that was there knew that it was a miracle, right? You didn't have to have it investigated, right? It was really beyond question.
It happened a week later.
It happened right then. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to begin at the beginning. If you would, turn over to John chapter 2. That'll be our text. With the first miracle. And what was that? Water to wine. Okay, so we're going to spend our time there. But to kind of set up for that, hopefully you can read that. It's a little bit small. We want to go back to chapter 1, okay, because this is part of a larger story here. And to fully appreciate this miracle, we have to appreciate the larger context, okay? So we open up John, and we have those great verses, the first 14 verses there, saying the Word was God, was with God, everything was created through Him and for Him. Y'all are very familiar with it, okay? So we have John the Apostle testifying that Jesus is God, all right? And then we get into verses 29 through 34. This is John the Baptist. Of course, he preceded Christ and prepared the way for Him. And he makes a couple of statements there. The Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And then a little bit later in 34, I think, calls him the Son of God. Okay? So we've already had 3 declarations in the very first chapter here about Jesus being the Son of God. And then the end of the chapter, the first disciples are called. Andrew, Peter, and John, verses 35 through 42. And they declare, we have found the Messiah. Okay? And they declare that to Philip and Nathanael in verses 43 through 49. And if you remember the story there, and which one was it that was sitting under the tree? Nathanael sitting under the fig tree. And Jesus told him he's seen him sitting there, and that was not a miracle, but more like a prophet, I guess. And he declares, you are the Son of God, because of that small little thing that Jesus shared with him. And what does Jesus tell him? You will see greater things than these. And that's the way the chapter ends, okay? So you have these disciples. The points I want you to remember really, we'll come back to it before the end of the hour. They declare, we have found the Messiah. You are the Son of God. And Jesus tells them, you're going to see greater things than these, okay? That kind of sets us up to go into chapter 2. Okay, so the first 2 verses there. Any questions, comments? I ran through that pretty quick. Okay. Oh, one other thing. I knew I went too quick. There in verse 14 of chapter 1. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Remember that phrase as we go through these miracles. That's going to continue to come back to us. Even the one this morning, remember that. This Son came full of grace and full of truth. All right? Okay. John chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. Okay, so a few things we need to kind of dig in here and go a little deeper on. Where is Cana? Do we know? In Galilee. We don't know exactly where it was. It's believed to be to the northwest, I believe, of Nazareth. It would have been in the neighborhood where Jesus was raised. Okay, but we don't know exactly where it was, which tells you what about the town of Cana? Small. And as rural folks, we're familiar with this, right? We all know these little communities that dot our countryside may not be big enough for a school. Maybe they had a school at one time, but they don't any longer. I grew up in Ashland. My dad was the last graduating class out of Ashland. And there's just a small community out there. People still live there, few houses, maybe 100 people, right? And we've got these little places all over if you think about it. That's Cana. Probably not more than 300 people living there, okay? Very small. Some of them said there may not have been 100 people living there. It's just a community, right? And they didn't have good ways to travel. If they wanted to go anywhere, what did they do? They walked, right? If they were lucky, they had a donkey maybe they rode. But yeah, over.
Did Ashland ever have high school, or did it?
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was the last graduating class from high school. Yeah. Oh, next to last. Sorry. Yeah, he's not as old as I want to make him, I guess. So. Yeah. But y'all get the idea. This is a very small town, very isolated, probably. I mean, there would be some comings and goings, but it wasn't like where we jump in car and we can run across the state in half a day, right? So they're a little bit isolated, and so they're having this this wedding, which would be a big event. Now you think about life in the town of Cana. 6 days a week, what are you doing? Working, trying to eke out an existence, right? Maybe you got a few sheep or a few goats or a few crops, and it's just today's the same as yesterday, okay? And they just make their way through life that way. So when this wedding comes up, what do you see? What does that mean for a small community? Everybody knew everybody, okay? Both the families probably knew each other, right? This pair may have been picked out for one another some time before, right? And this is going to be a huge celebration, okay? We've got this new family beginning with this husband and wife, but it's the join of two families as well. And they exist in this very dismal, hardworking type of atmosphere. And so when they have the opportunity to celebrate, they celebrate, okay? And the way this would happen would be on the day of the wedding, and that evening, the bridegroom and his friends would gather up and they would light torches and they would go to the bride's house and gather her up, and the wedding celebration would begin. And it's not like the weddings today. You know, the weddings today are what? You get there at 6, pretty much the thing is done by 6:15, right? I've never married anybody. Randy, that's about how long it takes, 15, 30 minutes maybe. And then you have a little reception and everybody's probably on their way home by 8 or 9, except the cleanup crew. Right? They didn't even get started in 3 hours there. This would sometimes, it wouldn't go a whole week. Sometimes it would go a whole week. But, you know, it might go 2 days, it might go 3 days, it might go 7 days. All right? Think about that. This is a huge event. And Jesus, we find, was invited, okay? And his mother was also there, all right? And just because they were probably in a community pretty close to this, they weren't from Cana, they were from Nazareth, but they were close enough that they were included and invited. All right? Questions and comments on that? Just kind of setting the stage there a little bit so that we understand what's going on. All right. Verse 3, when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Okay, so another part about this wedding we need to understand. The wedding was a contract, okay? And so if the bridegroom failed to provide a wedding feast, he could be held legally, and his family legally liable for that, okay? Even to the point if they ran out of wine. So there's another aspect. It's not just that of social embarrassment. There's a legal obligation that the bride is supposed to take care of. The bridegroom is supposed to take care of this. Okay, so that, just keep that in mind. This is a big deal, okay, to both families. And so when she sees that the wine's beginning to run out, Mary begins to become worried, okay? I don't know why Mary is the one that takes the lead here. She's not from this town, I don't think. I don't know, maybe it's a distant relative. I don't know. Maybe it's just Mary being Mary and she's aware of what's going on and going to take care of it. I don't know. We're not really told that. Yes?
Do you ever wonder how Mary knew that Jesus could take care of it? Had she seen this before? I mean, I know there's.
There you go. Thank you. Why did she turn to Jesus? That's a great question. Me and you both come up with it, so it must be a good one. Why did Mary turn to Jesus? She knew he could do it, right? Had she seen him work a miracle before? It says that this is his first miracle. So I don't think. Okay, that's fair. That was a miracle of sorts, right? The virgin birth. So, and she was told about this before it happened, and it happened. So, and she has lived with Jesus for all these years, raised him as a son. She was there when they found him with the temple priest, and he was befuddling them with the knowledge that he had.
She knew he was the Son of God.
And she knew he was the Son of God. She had received the prophecy and the songs from John, from John's parents, right? Yeah, Mike?
That might have been his first public miracle, but it says in there he did many things. And,
Yeah.
we're not supposed to record them. So who knows what all he did for his mother growing up.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, right?
Could have been his first like public.
Right. The first of his ministry. Yeah, who knows what goes on in the house with a mother and a son. Some have speculated she turns to Jesus, speculated that Joseph had probably already passed away at this time, and that Jesus was the man of the house as the oldest sibling. And so she would have immediately turned to him as the one kind of in charge of their family. She brought him all the problems that the family would have incurred. Okay. But it could be that she just knew he'd take care of it, right? That he'd fix it. Okay. Why is Jesus reluctant? Yeah, he says his time has not yet come. Okay, so when he works this miracle, what's going to happen? People are going to talk. We love to talk, right? And so they're going to come with all kinds of requests once it gets out that there's a man from Nazareth that can do miracles. Even at this point, we don't know this, but this is a small miracle, really, compared to some of the miracles he's going to work, if there's such a thing as a small miracle. But when the word gets out, the clock starts ticking, right? And the progress towards the cross begins. And he knows that. He says that. Now, I don't know if John intended this when he was writing it, but I find this one of the most humorous scriptures in the Bible. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." Mary completely ignores what he says and turns to the servant and says, "Do whatever he tells you." She had faith in him, but she completely treats him like a son. I mean, she just, he's saying, "What's this have to do with me, woman? This is not my problem." And she just ignores him and talks to the servants. For some reason, that strikes me as humorous. No offense, Mom, but y'all get that? Do you see what I'm saying there? I mean, she just goes on and tells him to take care of it, assumes he will, knows he will. Okay.
Well, that also shows the love that he had for his mother.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of love there because he didn't want to disobey her, and he also wanted to do what she needed done.
Yeah. And she ended up being right, and he did what she asked him to do, right? So he honored her in that request.
Yeah.
Barbara?
And it also speaks of the character of Mary. She's probably a mover and shaker.
Sure.
She gets things done.
That's what I see happening, and we all know women like this. At the church at Kiowa, you want to know who the two women that were that? It was Sue Hobbs and Jeree Daniel, if any of y'all know her. They were always, if something needed to be done, they were in there busy doing it, And Sue's, of course, y'all know that about Sue from the many years she's attended here. This is the way I see Mary. She was back there helping them keep the wine flowing and the food flowing, and that's just who she was, I think, probably. We're given some insight into her character there. That's a great point. Anybody else?
She had earned Jesus' respect.
Sure. Yeah. She had earned his respect, and he was going to honor his father and his mother, right? He knew that was his responsibility.
So how old was Jesus about this on this, do you think?
I think we probably have to think he's around 30 years old. We know his ministry. He was crucified when he was 33. His ministry was about 3 years, we think. So he was about 30 years old. Is that fair, Randy? Yeah. I think that's a good question. Again, the clock's starting here, right? So this is we'd probably say his official start was when he was baptized by John the Baptist. But anyway, we're on the same time frame there. Yeah, Mike?
synagogue. It says he had to be about his father's business, but after that, it says he was obedient to his parents.
Sure.
So he was a mama's boy, maybe. He did what mama said.
Yeah.
He said, it's not my time. He just let them do what he says, because she knew he was going to do what she asked to a large extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Great respect for going both ways here, and just great love between a mother and a son, I think. And if it's true that Joseph has already passed, that relationship's probably even stronger because she's now dependent on him for her well-being.
Bring back to your question, Luke tells us in Luke 4 that he started his ministry at age 30. So
Okay.
he started, and this is kind of giving the signal, this is probably about the time his public ministry started.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It tells us it starts at 30, so. this
Yeah.
is-
I assume that whether you want to say it's the baptism or this miracle probably all happened within a few weeks of one another. Is the way I've always thought of it. So he's 30 years old for our purposes. Okay. Now we get to the heart of the scripture that we're going to be studying. Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. And so they took it, and when the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine, and he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. Okay. And we're going to kind of approach this from a devotional standpoint. Going to be challenging you with some questions as we go through. Feel free to answer those publicly if you want, but I want you all to try to think about and answer them privately. There's hopefully some good challenges here that will make us better disciples. Jesus is the author of joy. Let's talk a little bit about John versus Jesus. Because 3 of these disciples that have accompanied, at least 3, that have accompanied Jesus to this wedding were previously John's disciples, okay? And it's interesting, I think, to discuss what do we know about John? What kind of individual was he? A Nazarite? Lived in the desert, wilderness, ate locusts with honey. He was Jesus' cousin. Okay, so they probably knew each other.
Very brave.
Brave. Okay. What about his personality? Do we know anything about his personality?
Wasn't well kept, was he?
No. He wore.
Mountain man now.
Yeah, he's more of an ascetic hermit.
Yeah.
That old traditional prophet in the sense of Elijah, where he kind of just lives off by himself and comes in every now and then and preaches damnation and salvation is coming, judgment is coming. And then would go back to his cave and eat some more wild locusts and honey and maybe brush the dirt off his fur skins that he's wearing. Fair? That's kind of the impression I've got. He's in the old style of the prophets. He's a little bit, personality-wise, is he going to be a joy to be around?
He called out sin when he saw it, for sure.
Yeah. Outspoken. And that was his job, right? To be fair, he's fulfilling his destiny here. He's supposed to be preparing the way for the kingdom. And part of that preparing the way for the kingdom is to make people aware of, you're lost and you're going to go to hell if you don't change your ways. That's his job, to do that. So this is not a criticism of John. I just want you to compare John, his personality, and where his disciples had been following him as their rabbi. They've now switched and followed this Lamb of God who John has identified for them. And what do we know about Jesus, personality-wise?
Strict and loving.
Strict and loving? What did you say? He's outspoken. He's not afraid to call a spade a spade.
But he's compassionate.
He's compassionate. He goes to the wedding. You see John going to the wedding? I don't. John's not going to be invited, for one, probably. But he's not going to go. It's not his scene. But we constantly see Jesus going to the wedding, going to the dinner, going to the party, surrounded by people. Do you see where I'm going with that? Jesus is attractive to people. People want to be in his presence, and he wants to be in their presence. He enjoys. He's a people person, I think. Is that fair? And part of that is this author of joy. He brings joy to everyone he meets. That's what's so attractive about him. Now, he has these moments where he preaches damnation. The Pharisees didn't take a lot of joy when he was around, right? But his friends and his followers, his disciples, I think they've seen a very joyful person in Jesus. I think sometimes we forget that because we know the end of the story. It's not the very end, but he's going to die on a cross before he's resurrected and glorified. And we know that's coming. So we always think that's on his mind, but I don't think he lived his life that way. A couple of scriptures. That my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. John 15:11. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. That was part of his mission, was to bless us not only in the next life, but to bless us in this life and to bring joy in this life. Are we expressing that? How well are we expressing the life and joy? If we're Jesus' disciples and he was full of joy and he brought joy, are we doing the same? Do people see us that way as Christians? Do they think of John or do they think of Jesus when they think about us and our attitudes towards people? I hope it's more about Jesus. Bill?
Well, we would be if we come to church and listen to what's being taught.
Okay. But to be fair, even some of the things we've taught traditionally have been kind of negative, and there's a time for that. I don't want to, I think we don't want to throw out the fire and the brimstone completely because people have to be made known. They have to be taught that. But I'm talking about in your day-to-day lives. Are you living a life of joy that's going to attract people to you so that you can share the good news and let them know where that joy comes from in your life? That's the challenge, I think. Greg?
Well, I know I try to start out that way. And Satan, he sure tries to throw a lot at us during the daytime,
Yeah.
But it's really all in how we take it. I don't always take it so good some days, but some days I take it with a grain of salt and move on. And I think that's what he expects of us to do, is take it with a grain of salt, move on, trust me, and keep walking in me. And that's the struggle we have. That's, because we want to get angry. We want to bark back at somebody that barks at us. I'm the world's worst about when somebody barks at me, we're tensing up and.
Yeah.
But I've gotten better. I'm still not real good at it, but I have gotten better than what I used to be.
Yeah, and maybe if we can think in terms of who's bringing those obstacles into our life, it's going to be Satan. It may not be a temptation to sin. It may just be problems, right, that he's challenging you with, robbing you of your joy. And if we can be aware of that and keep that perspective and know that that's what's happening in the moment, maybe we can get through those moments a little easier, right?
Or learn to swallow your pride and come back
Yeah.
and apologize when you get a moment to get away from that situation and calm down
Yeah.
and realize I misspoke myself, because sometimes in the heat of the moment you say things you don't mean to say.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's human nature.
Yeah. One of the words that keeps coming back to me in my Christian walk is perspective. to try to keep things in their proper perspective. There's really nothing going to happen to me tomorrow that's a very big deal
Right.
in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger perspective, and in my relationship with God and with Jesus. If you can keep that perspective, I think that's a long way towards, and that's just something that I keep coming back to in my own personal walk. Okay, we need to move on here. Jesus exceeds our needs. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Okay. This is going to be 100 to 150 gallons estimated. This is 1,600 to 2,400 servings of wine. Okay, remember what we're talking about here. We're in a small little town. There's probably not more than a few dozen people at this wedding feast. And even though they're about out of wine, what's Jesus done? He gave it to them in an abundance. All right? More than they will never use on this wedding. Perhaps this is his wedding gift to the couple, because this has value. This is not just any wine. This is what we find out. It's the best wine, right? It's going to have some value to it. So maybe this is a gift on his part. But the point is, he didn't just do enough to get them through the evening. He did enough. He gave them more than they would ever expected or would ever need. All right. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Okay, this is a theme we're going to find with Christ. Is he always exceeds the expectation. Do I trust Jesus with all of my needs? Okay, is he the first place you go when you need something? And with what do I? This may be more telling. With what do I not trust him with fully? Are there some areas of your life that you haven't given over to him? Out with the old and in with the new. The jars that were used, the kind used by Jews for ceremonial washing. Okay, he tells us that there in the verse. We also know that because of the type of jars they were. They were stone jars. Okay. These were the only type of jars that could be used for the ceremonial washing. They couldn't use old cleaned out gourds or metal pans or clay pots. They had to use jars that were made out of stone, okay, carved from stone. And they, as you know, the Jews took great pride in all these legalistic requirements in everything that they'd done, from keeping the Sabbath to these ceremonial washings, okay? And the biggest volume of these regulations that they had to do with these ceremonial washings. They took them very, very seriously, okay? And so these jars are sitting there, and that's what they're used for. That's their only purpose. It wasn't for household water. It was for these ceremonial washings. And they had a bunch of them there, I guess, because of the wedding. But so it's interesting. Jesus takes this oppressive symbol, and I say oppressive because if we understood all that was involved in these washings and how often they had to do it, it was a burden to keep these rules, okay? And he takes the symbol of that and he kind of transforms that into something wonderful, where it's a gift of abundance from him to the bride and the groom and to the wedding party. Using the symbol, I don't think that's happened by accident, okay, is the point. He was taking something old and he's going to transform it into his purposes and something new, okay? And if you want to follow that along, what happens in the next chapter? Or the next set, what's the next thing that happens that we're told about? Not the next chapter, it's at the end of chapter 2. He clears out the temple. People are misusing the temple. He cleans out the old, and he's going to bring in this new, okay? So just another theme there, I think, that John's bringing out for us. Which I said there. What old things in my life am I still holding on to? Again, just a challenge for your own discipleship. Examine your own life. Are some things you're holding on to that don't belong to Him, that you haven't given over to Him? That's part of your old life or part of the world that doesn't belong in your life. And for all you women out there, I wasn't talking about your husbands, Sharon. The old things you're hanging on to in your life, you can. Sorry, that was a weak attempt at a joke. I try to pick on Owen when I get a chance, but
Hey, know how old I am and how young you are, that's crock pots that he used.
okay. Yeah, I don't know what a crock pot is. No, I do really. So. All right. Jesus saves the best for last. Everyone serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. Okay. It wasn't just that Jesus gave it in abundance. Okay. What did He also do? He gave it the very best. Okay. I have to think this is probably the best wine that's ever been made at any time in history. Was the wine that He made. Satan does it the other way around. He serves the best first and then the worst later. Anybody want to guess what I mean by that?
Makes everything look so sweet and nice. As soon as you get into it, wow, drops out.
Yeah. It's all good at first, right? Whether you're talking about the relationship our world has with sex right now, and it's free and it's easy, and you should sleep with whoever you want to. But then what happens later? We're not told about all the disease or the unwanted pregnancies or the broken families, the broken marriages, the destroyed households because of this thing that Satan made look good, so good up front and at first. Satan brings the best first, and the worst comes later. You think of other examples. Yeah, Barbara?
One of the things, the characteristics of Satan is he doesn't talk about consequences
Right.
on anything.
Yeah.
There's no consequences for sin as far as he's concerned.
It's all about the moment in the beginning. Look what you can have without, and then don't really think past that. Okay. If you think much past that, then it's easier to resist. Is his attitude, I think. I think you can say the same thing about drugs, right? Alcohol, even ironically, we're talking about wine, right? But it's the abuse of alcohol, obviously. Owen?
The difference between Satan and God is Satan's for eternal death, and God is for eternal life.
Right. Back to the scripture, Jesus came to bring us life. I think in this life and the next life. Jesus turns the bad into good. He does it the opposite way. Can you think of examples of that from scripture? Before the promised land, what did they go through? The wilderness, right? The cross came before the crown. We're going to suffer and live this life here on earth, as hard as it is sometimes, before we are rewarded in heaven. And we have to keep that in mind. Jesus always turns the bad into good. Satan turns the good into bad. It may be the best way to think of that.
Like kind of when Aaron talked to Wednesday night about weight being in our, being a bad thing, 40 years in the wilderness, they had to wait.
Right. Right. And we have to wait as well for our reward, right? We have to endure this life to get to the eternal life. And that kind of takes us to what am I enjoying now that will end in eventual death and decay? Is there anything in your life that you recognize from these verses that maybe you need to fix? Okay. Again, just another challenge question for your own personal discipleship. I brought this verse up because I think this wedding in John 2 is put there to remind us of the wedding to come. Revelation 19, 7-9. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted to her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure, for fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. And the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. So this first idea of this first miracle being worked at a wedding, I don't think it's an accident. I think the wedding holds significance because there's a wedding to look forward to, a wedding feast to look forward to as his children when we're called home. And in this case, Jesus is the bridegroom and we are the bride as his church. Okay. Any other comments? I think we're about out of time. Thank you.